this week's Food Sports Central, the podcast of the World Food Championships. I'm your host, Mark Conway, and we are rumbling, bumbling, stumbling towards final table. Bentonville, Arkansas is getting the welcome mat ready. The red carpet is being cleaned, and we are a matter of weeks away from finding out who will be the new World Food Champion. Last year in Lake Murray, South Carolina, we saw Preston win and become our world champion. This year, Preston's not going to be at final table as a competitor, so we will have a new world food champion. That being said, we have a few people who have already been to final table before in various formats in various years. So there is some level of brand new and experienced veteran in this group of 10. Categories were a knockout this year. We had our standard 10 categories, heavy competition in each category, and it was a very, and we've talked about this quite a bit, a very global presence across the landscape of food sport. But one category in particular seems to draw that nostalgic feel, really kind of hit home with so many people, whether it's thinking of family or thinking of gatherings, thinking of cold winter days. It is the soup category. The soup category took the place of chili a few years ago and has really kind of lent itself as a palette for creativity. Because let's be real, soup can be anything, any type of flavor profile, any type of cultural influence, any type of global cuisine, soup has a place. And soup, by definition, really can be a lot of different things. And we saw that at WFC this year. So we want to bring in the new, shiny, reigning 2022 soup champion, who I must say also won a category in a previous year and went to final table that year, of course, as well. So I want to welcome to the show the 2022 Soup Champion, Rocky Julianelle. How are you, sir?
Great. Thanks, Mark, for having me on.
Absolutely. I mean, you are a food sports staple. You compete multiple times, multiple ways, different competitions each year, and this is not your first go around with WFC. You've been in WFC about 7 years now. You know, what draws you to food sport?
Um, I think it's partly the fact that I love food, and I grew up in a family of chefs. My dad was a hotel chef for many years. My mom actually had a small little diner. I've been around food and food preparation, and I'm a creative person, and I think being competitive and creative and love of food, um, I think that food sport kind of found me, and I think it's a perfect fit for the type of person I am.
I think so too, and that's pretty evident by the fact that you win. Not only do you compete, but you win at food sport. Now, you've been at now with WFC about 7 years. Did you compete prior in other food sport prior to joining WFC? How did that work out?
So I kind of wanted to do something. I wanted to compete. I'm a competitive person, like I said, and food sport appealed to me. So it was about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I started competing in barbecue. It was the easiest venue, if you want to call it that, to get started because it was pretty big back then, and I did pretty well. I was asked to compete in a bull burger contest, and it was back in 2016 or 17, I believe, and that's where I met Mike McLeod. And after hearing his speech to all the cooks, he if I wasn't hooked then at before, I was hooked after that. And then, as you know, I compete in chili and barbecue and steak, soup, and whatever other contests come my way. So yes, so I guess that's the start.
And then in 2019 at the WFC, which was the last year of the chili category before it transitioned into soup, You actually won the chili competition, became the 2019 chili champ, and went on to Indianapolis to final table there. So this year won't be your first category win and won't be your first year at final table.
No, it's the second time around for me, and a lot of people have asked me, friends and family have asked me, if you do something twice or if you win something of this size two times, is it just as exciting? It's exactly the same. The excitement level is the same. And as a competitor, I think, especially a person like myself who likes to always put my best work forward, I think that I can sum it up by saying I feel like I have a little unfinished business at final table. So uh, yes, it's still exciting, and it's an amazing experience all the way through.
When you walked into Dallas this year, which would be the World Food Championships third year in Dallas, Texas, we're getting ready to start our fourth year. When you walked in and you saw the banners hanging from the rafters, you saw the kitchen stadium set up, was there any different feel this year versus previous years?
Well, there were some changes that all the competitors knew about, and I knew that the judging process would be slightly different, and I was excited about that. I think I'm the type of a person where I'm open for new things and progression, and I think it was a success. But yes, I did have some apprehension, but as I watched the categories prior to soup, and I think it just built up to even be more exciting.
It did. I mean, we had the master chefs where they were going to choose an 11th person to go in. We had the change where you don't do two cooks in the first round, you just cook once. And then,
Yeah.
of course, presenting to the master judges in the final round. Now, with a category like soup, did you feel like it gave you a lot of creative flexibility to really kind of flex your culinary chops?
I think soup. Again, I've been asked. Since November. Soup is a. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to talk like an old school chef. My dad was actually a soup, sauce, and stock chef, and he always told me that to develop flavor, if you're a good chef, and most restaurants are kind of gauged by how well a chef can develop flavor in either a soup or a stock. And so there is a lot of creativity, but there's some fundamental components of building that flavor. And I think doing it under the hour and a half or 2 hours, it's challenging. It really is. And so you have to be careful of what you choose so you can execute. You know.
So, talking about your dishes at WFC, walk us through what you created for the opening round and the top 10 round.
Okay, so I'm from the Northeast here in Connecticut, right in the center of, I would say, seafood, like cold water seafood, lobster, shrimp, things like that. And I'm a big chowder person. We're we live in an area where I'm just perhaps 15 or 20 minutes from a stretch of a shorefront that you can get clam chowder, shrimp chowder, lobster chowder. And so I felt like I wanted to do something that, tied, my region to my choice. And my choice was lobster and corn chowder. And, I had a recipe before, and it was the place to start. But it developed into something special as I decided to go with it, and spent the time to kind of refine it and make it of more of a masterpiece than just a bowl of chowder.
And you really did that because it caught the judge's attention, it caught the master judge's attention. And when you talk about something like a lobster chowder and a corn chowder, those are both tend to lean towards that sweet element. So being able to balance that to create a very rich chowder is fantastic, especially under the stress of a time constraint and not necessarily being inside your home kitchen and really working towards putting out a product that would place you into that round of 10, which this year was 11, but get you into that next round to compete again. And you were really able to do that very successfully, to a lot of praise from pretty much everybody that tried it.
Yeah, I think again a lot of practicing, and you brought a great point. You know, you want each component to shine, and you don't want it to seem one note. And you're absolutely right. So there was a lot of experimenting and a lot of it took a lot of technique to make a, I thought, and I think the judges agreed to have a nicely balanced chowder. And it was also accompanied with a lobster uh, and corn fritter, which I don't like to add things, especially garnishes, unless they tie into the dish or they're going to be an integral component. And I think that the soft kind of creamy chowder with the crunchy um, fritter, I think it was just a perfect match.
Absolutely. I mean, texture is such a big component and a challenge at times to bring into something like soup. You know, a lot of times the texture element is a almost a throwaway. It's they throw something crunchy on top, or they throw, all kinds of things. I've seen croutons and things like that. But making that fritter brought the flavors from the chowder over into the fritter, tied everything together nice with a really good textural element, and that definitely did. That put you right there in the championship round. Now, did you make that dish again, or did you make a different dish for the finals?
So in the final round, I I laugh, I giggle a little about that final round dish because I got some resistance from my sous chef, which is my wife. And the reason for that was as I chose a very simple bisque, and it was a tomato bisque. And, I've gotten some remarks, not, and some of them perhaps maybe not favorable in regards to that, how simple it was. And so I made it clear, and I think you were on stage when I was judged by the judge. I made it very clear that I wouldn't have tried to do that unless I knew I can execute it perfectly, or even again another masterpiece. And so what I was thinking is I had nothing to hide behind. So if I were able to develop the flavors and I practiced it many times, um, then I knew that it would be a great dish. Whether it would be, I should say, accepted, by the judges or understood, that was another thing. But it was, and I think the crab, there was a small crab tower, like a miniature crab cake, and I think that component with the grilled cheese, and I think it was just, I think it was a perfectly balanced dish again, and I think the simplicity of it um, made you almost scratch your head, like, wow, there's really not many bells and whistles here. So if you don't get this perfect, and I think they appreciated it. I think they appreciated the risk and the flavor. I think it spoke for itself.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. You said the risk. There is such a huge risk in going for what someone would perceive as a simplistic dish, because like there's nothing to hide behind. It is straightforward. It is a flavor profile people are extremely familiar with and honestly have very strong opinions about. So it's a huge risk to make that unless you are 100% sure you can knock it out of the park. You're going to hit every velvety texture, you're going to hit every acidic note, you're going to hit every balance of flavor, and then to know what to put with that, the grilled cheese, the crab, like that was a huge thing to really tackle with such a familiar flavor profile. And yeah, you're exactly right. You had to ace it all the way across the board, or you would risk taking a huge hit from judges, and you definitely did that.
Right, and again, I think my choice was based on how we fell into the top 10. Like if we were, my remarks to my wife, or again, I take her opinion very seriously. I said if we're in the top one or two or three, and I feel like we can do this because this is was I was very passionate about making that bisque. And if, for instance, Mark, if we had some trouble in the first round, and perhaps we're eighth or ninth or even 10th, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have had to try to do something more impressive on its own. And so we were we were fortunate, that they received the chowder so well that we were able to do that.
And that did, and that makes a lot of sense. And that plays to strategy and understanding competing in the food sport arena to say, okay, I placed high in round one. That gives me some leeway to go out on a limb on something that I think that I can do really spectacularly. Whereas if you would have come in much lower, that would have definitely altered your feeling because then you have to know you have to try something else. But I really think, regardless whether you placed at the top or at the bottom in the first round, going into that challenging round, putting together that particular dish to that level of perfection, it speaks for itself loudly. And the judges felt the same way. And now here you are, the 2022 World Soup Champion. So, you've been in a position before of winning a category because in 2019 you were the World Chili Champ and headed to final table. Does it feel any different this year as you come away from WFC and you're looking forward to final table? Is there any of the feelings different? Or does it feel similar?
Well, it feels slightly different. I think the difference is, for me anyway, and I think I'm going to mention Jody. Jody might feel the same way. I say that group or that class of 2019 had the COVID kind of overshadowing everything. So we don't have that now. And I feel like, not that I can, I know I'll be able to enjoy it. We had a spectacular time in Indy, but I feel like I can concentrate more on my performance or what I'm going to do. And I'm a very, I don't know how I can explain that, but I take my competition cooking very seriously. I practice an awful lot. And you see, or somebody sees a dish or they see work that either myself and my sous chef do, and that's hours and hours and hours and days and planning and practicing. So you see the final product, and so I feel like now with the release of not having COVID over our heads, I feel like I can really spend more time, the time I really want to prepare. And so that might be the biggest difference.
That makes a lot of sense. You're really not handcuffed anymore by what the limitations are going to be. You're kind of more focusing on what do I get to do? What can I do? What things can I bring to the table? And when you run this new culinary gauntlet, because we kind of talked a little bit about, before we even got on air, about what the previous final tables were like. Well, now we're in this culinary gauntlet where you're cooking through different stages to progress on. It requires a lot of different skill sets. And right now, you're not sure what those competitions are, but you are kind of well versed in many different cooking techniques. Is there any type of technique that you're working on prior to getting there?
Well, like I said earlier, I'm a practice. I like to practice. I'm a chef. I've cooked in restaurants in the 80s and 90s, and so I'm not in the kitchen anymore. And I'm actually a home builder. I built my family and myself a house, and I have a test kitchen here in my home, and I'm in it all the time, either developing and recipes or practicing. And I think that I'm a firm believer of technique. And going back to the soups, there's a lot of technique involved to make things uh, better than what the description might have it. And I think would be the thing that I'd be working on now. And it's not about having tricks or having some kind of like magic wand. It's about just being creative and trying to establish a course of action without skipping steps to create good flavor. Because again, we're working under time restraints, and so that would be the only thing I'm always constantly reviewing past work I've done and trying to improve and constantly improve. saving time, chipping away at a recipe and being able to execute it quicker. Um, I think that's really all I can do now until I'm faced with the actual challenge.
And I think that's the smart thing to do is it's always about the fundamentals. I think with anything that you cook, anything that you make, whatever the dish is, regardless of the genre of food or maybe an influence here or there, it's really the fundamentals. Do you when it comes down to something as simple as understanding pickling, you want to add that little acidity to a dish and maybe texture to a dish. You can do it by simply adding something that's pickled, but you really have to know that technique because there are nuances to it and there are ways you can bring it, a little more sweet or a little more bite or whatever it is. And if you don't have those fundamentals locked down, that's not a tool you have in your toolbox when you get to the competition stage. So I absolutely agree. I think that that's the best way to be is have those strong fundamentals in place as you push your way to final table. Have you done any other competing since World Foods?
I actually competed yesterday in New Jersey. Actually, I'm sorry, Saturday. And it's. I was smiling when you said pickling because it was a salsa competition, and I tried a technique by pickling at the event because it has to be done there. I pickled some of the vegetables, and I
Mm.
cut them in different sizes. I've done this already as an experiment, and we came in second. We lost by 1 point, but I have to tell you, um, it's good that to me it feels like if you have an idea that you're going to implement into a competition, and the judges receive it well, you feel like, hey, I think I'm onto something. And so that's kind of what the past, and since then I haven't competed since November. It's the holidays and more of kind of like a family atmosphere. But that's kind of funny that you mentioned pickling because I actually did that.
That's one of my favorite things. I think that pickling adds so much diversity to really any kind of dish. It doesn't matter what kind it is. I think you can have different elements to that. Well, that's fantastic. Oh, the food and food sport you brought up with family time and things like that. Food really is that kind of the glue that holds so many things together, and it's such a big thing for family. Do you get together and cook with family a lot and things like that?
Yes, I do actually. Like I said earlier, we have a pretty large family, and we're Italian American. We think that every day that you can, cook and be together is like a blessing. So, it's not as I should say it's not as often as it was years ago. But we like to get together, like with my sisters. I have three sisters, and my wife also has a pretty good sized family. So we try to get together and cook. We cook together. We kind of share ideas, and they're always trying to, poke at me, see if they can get some secrets and things. And they call me quite a bit, and I think that part of it is, it just keeps the family closer. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like lobster thermidor. It could just be some simple, little barbecue or some, just a simple little Sunday dinner. And I think, like you said earlier, um, it's part of that family. It's what ties us all together, And I feel like, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have that element in my life. So I agree.
Well, that's fantastic. Do you have any like social media where people can follow you if they want to kind of keep up with your culinary journey?
Sure. Years ago, I did some YouTube channel, some stuff, not many. I did a few things, but I'm on Facebook. I use it occasionally. People, they message me on Facebook, and I have an Instagram account. I should probably use it more than I do, but I'm kind of, I'm on social media a lot, and I think I use it as a source of information, as you know, and because it's
Hmm.
certainly there, and for news and also for updates from the WFC and other things, and but I think that's about my extent for social media.
No, that totally makes sense. And you made a good point. To keep up with what's going on in the world of food sport, you want to make sure that you are following the World Food Championships on Instagram and Facebook. and also bookmark the website. Don't sleep on that.
Correct, right.
www.worldfoodchampionships.com, because there is a lot of deadlines and rules and information to come out to where you can not only attend food sport in your area, but also compete and possibly win your way into the World Food Championships. We have had the absolute pleasure today to talk with our reigning 2022 World Soup Champion, Rocky Julianelle. And man, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck in the world. I can't wait to see you compete at Final Table, and we'll chat more soon.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
All right, you guys, you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next time.